Does an autistic person experience time differently?
Yes, potentially. But I think the deeper answer is more interesting than simply saying autistic people experience time differently. We don't actually experience time directly. We experience changes, events, memories, expectations, and the movement of our attention. And our brain turns all of that into a sense of time. For some autistic people, that experience can be quite different. Time can seem incredibly slow when they're waiting, transitioning, or dealing with something unpredictable. But when they're deeply absorbed in something they love, hours can disappear without them noticing. And I think the really interesting part is the connection between time and attention. If your attention becomes intensely focused on one thing, the clock can almost disappear from your experience. Your mind isn't necessarily tracking 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's following the thing you're deeply engaged with. Then there's another layer: prediction. Your brain is constantly anticipating what happens next. If something changes unexpectedly, your brain has to adjust that prediction. For some autistic people, transitions and unexpected changes can require much more processing. So the movement from what was happening to what is happening now may feel much bigger. That makes me wonder whether the difference isn't really that autistic people have a different clock inside their brain. Maybe they can have a different relationship with change, and that changes how time feels. And there's a fascinating connection to what we were saying about puzzles. A puzzle has a beginning, a process, and a completed pattern. When someone becomes absorbed in connecting the pieces, their attention can become anchored to that process rather than to the passing clock. So, my own conclusion is this: I wouldn't say autism creates a completely different experience of time for everyone. I'd say autism can change the way attention, prediction, memory, and sensory information come together. And that can make the flow of time feel very different. And that leaves us with a deeper question. If our experience of time changes depending on what our consciousness is doing, are we actually experiencing time itself, or are we experiencing our relationship with change?
Why can puzzles and patterns be so important to autistic minds?
I think puzzles and patterns can be important to some autistic minds because they give the brain something it can discover, organize, and predict. A puzzle starts as separate pieces that don't make sense together. Then the mind begins finding relationships. This shape fits here, this color belongs there, this piece needs turning around. Slowly, something that looked chaotic becomes a whole. That process can be deeply satisfying. And I think there's a deeper layer. A puzzle gives you a world where the connections are actually there. If two pieces fit, they fit. If they don't, they don't. There's no guessing someone's hidden meaning, no unpredictable social rule, and no ambiguity about whether you found the relationship correctly. That can make patterns feel almost like a language. For someone who naturally pays close attention to relationships between things, a pattern isn't just a picture, it's information waiting to be decoded. And that connects directly with what you were describing about your son turning pieces upside down. He may not be attached to the usual orientation. He may be interested in the underlying relationship. Does this shape connect with that shape? If he rotates it, the relationship is still there. I wouldn't assume that's exactly what he's consciously thinking, but it's an interesting possibility. There's also a beautiful paradox here. Pattern seeking can be a strength because it can reveal connections other people overlook. But the brain can also find connections where there aren't meaningful ones. So the real skill isn't simply seeing patterns, it's learning which patterns actually correspond to something real. My own conclusion is that puzzles may be attractive because they give the mind a small, controllable version of a much bigger problem. Take separate pieces of information and discover how they belong together. And if that's part of what your son enjoys, then the puzzle might not just be something he's playing with. It could be a very simple environment where his brain gets to practice the thing it naturally enjoys most, making a world of separate pieces become a coherent whole.
Why can someone understand something in their mind, but they struggle to make their body to do it?
Yes, this is actually a really important distinction because understanding something and physically carrying it out are two different abilities. Someone can know exactly what they want their hand to do, but the brain still has to turn that intention into a sequence of precise movements. That involves motor planning, coordination, timing, sensory feedback, balance, and constantly adjusting the movement as it happens. So a person might look at a puzzle piece and know that piece goes there. Their visual system has identified it. Their thinking has worked out the solution. But then their hand has to reach, grasp it, rotate it to the correct orientation, control the pressure, and place it accurately. Those processes can be much harder than understanding the puzzle itself. This becomes particularly interesting with autism because some autistic people have motor planning or coordination difficulties. But it doesn't mean autism automatically causes this. And it doesn't mean someone who struggles physically doesn't understand what they're doing. In fact, I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings people can make. They see the physical difficulty and assume the thinking must also be difficult. Sometimes the thought is already there. The body just hasn't found the easiest pathway to express it yet. And that connects beautifully with what you were describing about your son. If he can identify the piece and understand where it belongs, but struggles with physically manipulating it, his puzzle could actually give you a glimpse of two different systems developing alongside each other: the mind solving the problem, and the body learning how to communicate that solution. My conclusion is that we should be careful about judging someone's understanding by what their body can demonstrate. A person's ability to execute an idea isn't always a measurement of how deeply they understand the idea.